What if the reason you're stuck isn't because you're weak, but because you've been at war with a version of yourself you never made peace with? There's a silence no one talks about. Not the silence in the room, but the one after the noise fades. And what's left behind? Shame. Not because you messed up, but because you didn't even try. You didn't act. You stood still while time walked away. Stick with me. By the end of this story, you'll understand why Carl Jung believed the part of you that keeps drifting off isn't lazy. It's exiled. And it's crying to come back home. No one tells you what it does to the human spirit to watch yourself break the same promise every single day. I'll start tomorrow. Except tomorrow never shows up. You pass by the mirror and feel that quiet anger. Not hate, no, just disbelief. You don't believe your own reflection anymore. You say you'll change. You say you're ready. And for a moment, you actually believe it. But then the next morning arrives and the version of you that made the vow? Gone. Replaced by the same tired face, doom scrolling, dodging, hiding. Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But maybe avoiding discipline isn't laziness. Maybe it's spiritual rebellion, a refusal to meet the future self you were meant to become. So here's where we begin. What if I told you the version of you that's tired, unfocused, and always distracted isn't you? It's just who you've practiced being. If you're already feeling that stir deep inside, don't just sit there. Subscribe. This channel, it speaks to the part of you nobody else sees. See, you've been told that discipline is about effort, but it's not. Discipline is identity. You won't become disciplined until you stop seeing yourself as someone who needs to try being disciplined. Weird, right? Stick around. It's about to click. Jung believed most people never become who they truly are. Not because they're lazy, but because they've never met their real self. They chase change like it's some external checklist. New job, new city, new productivity hacks. But you don't need more. You need less. Less escaping, less noise, less hiding from the one thing you've always feared, responsibility. Not to your boss, not to society, but to you, to the person you were born to become. That's where discipline begins. Not in to-do lists, not in 5 a.m. alarm, but in devotion. Now pause. When did you last feel truly alive? It wasn't during comfort, not during rest. It was when you were aligned, when your actions matched your intentions, when you kept your word, when you surprised yourself with what you could actually do. That wasn't just pride. That was integrity. And Carl Jung would say that's no accident. The mind craves wholeness. The more disconnected you are, saying one thing, doing another, the more your subconscious rebels. You'll feel resistance not because you're lazy, but because you're fragmented. You don't feel broken because you lack discipline. You feel broken because you're living a lie. Your mind isn't tired, it's rejecting the fraud. The version of you you're faking, the mask you've rehearsed. Most people miss this. Lack of discipline, it's not the disease, it's the symptom. The symptom of a soul split down the middle. You've been divided. One side of you sets goals, the other side silently shreds them. One part wants to rise, the other wants to disappear. And every day you repeat that silent war. You're not just wasting time. You're deepening the fracture, splitting further from who you were meant to be. Carl Jung warned us, what you resist persists. The parts of you you've rejected, they don't die. They wait. They become your shadow. Not just the dark and twisted urges, but the powerful parts too. the driven you, the structured, focused, ruthless warrior version of you, the one you locked away, not because you failed, but because you feared how strong you might actually be. Yeah, your strength is what terrifies you most, because if you really commit, if you become disciplined, you lose the ability to blame anyone. You can't hide behind potential anymore. You'll have to show up as proof, and that's terrifying. Because once you become proof, you can't turn back. You're either rising or dying, and now the world's watching. But here's the twist. You're already dying. Not physically, spiritually. Every time you ignore your own schedule, every time you abandon what mattered, every time you trade your purpose for a scroll, a snack, a cheap hit of dopamine, you're digging the hole deeper. You're not tired from life, you're tired from guilt. Guilt for not becoming the man you promised to be. So hear this, not with your ears, with your bones. Discipline isn't something you add. It's the soul's immune system. It protects you from rot, from regret, from becoming a man who gains the world, but loses himself. And if that hits you hard, don't keep it to yourself. Drop a comment. You might be the hand that pulls someone else out of the hole you just crawled from. Now pause for a second. Remember when you wanted this? Before the burnout. Before you forgot what you were made of. That version of you? He never died. He's been waiting, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to come back to the flame. The sacred fire where your discipline was forged. We're going back there. We'll light it again. But not yet. First, we need to go deeper. We're diving into the roots. Where the fracture really began. Why you avoid structure. Why the disciplined life feels like wearing someone else's skin. Because Jung's theory of archetypes, it holds the key to the hidden identity that's been sabotaging your efforts in the dark. This isn't hype. It's not another motivational high. This is a psychological exorcism. And once you see it, once the truth comes up from underground, you'll never be able to go back. You didn't become undisciplined by accident. You were trained, not by one dramatic failure, but by 1,000 small betrayals. Some from the world, some from you. And over time, you began to believe a subtle lie, that you're the kind of person who almost gets there, who nearly changes, who lives in potential, but never in power. Here's the truth no one ever told you. The story you live by? It's not even yours. It's a mask, a survival mask, hand-stitched from fear, rejection, and quiet childhood wounds no one else even noticed. And you wore it so long. You forgot it was never your real face. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So let's make it conscious, not to relive the past, but to understand it." Ask yourself, do you remember when discipline first hurt? Was it the moment you spoke with passion and got shut down? Was it the time you built something small and someone crushed it like it was nothing? Was it when you stuck to something, a schedule, a dream, a tiny spark of hope, and were mocked, ignored, dismissed? That's how the fracture starts. Not in laziness, but in pain. And here's the brutal irony no one talks about. The part of you that wants discipline, the part that craves structure, control, focus, is also the most fragile. Because it requires belief. Belief in your own power. And when that belief is shattered early, discipline doesn't die. It hides. This is what Jung called the repression of the noble archetypes. The king, the warrior, the architect of order, the part of you born to build, to command, to rise. still exists. He's just buried beneath a decade of shame and self-doubt. So now, every time you try to build a habit, wake up early, eat clean, start a focused sprint. You're not starting from zero. You're starting from a battlefield, fighting ghosts. Every failure from your past shows up whispering, you'll never follow through. You don't finish things. You're not that kind of person. And unless you confront this, unless you understand it, you'll keep sabotaging yourself. Not because you want to fail, but because some part of you still believes you must. Jung left us a weapon, a hard-earned insight. Your outer failures aren't about effort. They're about identity. You can't out-hustle a self-image that says you're not enough. You don't deserve to lead. You don't belong in greatness. No productivity tool can save you from that. You will always return to the man you believe you are. So how do we rewrite that belief? Not with cheap affirmations, not with hype or hustle, with integration. Picture it. Two men inside you. One wants to build. He's sovereign, focused, unshakable. He keeps his word, even in the dark. He leads himself without applause. The other? He wants peace, not victory. He avoids the fight, avoids the fire, avoids the weight of responsibility. He craves comfort, warmth, the right to disappear. These men aren't enemies. They're you. Split by a lifetime of misunderstanding. You don't need to kill your lazy self. You need to listen. Because he isn't weak. He's just scared. And he's been protecting you in the only way he knew how. So ask him, what are you protecting me from? You might be shocked by the answer. But in that moment, you begin the real healing. Let me tell you something most men will never hear in their lifetime. The part of you you've called lazy isn't your enemy. He's your protector. He's been shielding you from shame, from failure, from the sting of disappointment, from the echo of laughter that humiliated you when you dared to care about something. He's not trying to destroy your life. He's trying to guard you from the memory of being misunderstood, overlooked, dismissed. And once you finally see this, once you understand him, discipline stops being punishment. It becomes sacred. It becomes a return. Not a return to hustle or hype, but a return to the throne, the one you abandoned. Deep in your psyche, there is a king. He's been waiting, not to dominate, not to flex, but to stabilize. Jung knew this. Every man must meet his inner king. And when he does, he stops performing. He stops begging for permission. He no longer organizes his life to impress. He organizes it to reflect the inner kingdom he's finally restored. That's what real discipline is. It's not grinding. It's not cold showers and 5 a.m. alarms. It's psychological architecture, a reflection of inner order. Because when a man lacks discipline, he doesn't just lose time or productivity. He loses himself. That's why undisciplined men feel shame, even when no one's watching. Because they know. They're not just missing deadlines, they're betraying a deeper identity, a forgotten potential, a throne left empty. This is why motivation isn't enough. Because you don't need to be motivated, you need to remember. Remember the warrior, the builder, the father, the sovereign, the archetypes within you that were never erased, just silenced. So stop waiting to feel ready. Start living like a man who has already decided. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is the order I bring. And yes, you'll fail. It'll hurt, but failure won't break you anymore. Because your identity will no longer be up for negotiation. Here's what's happening. If you're still listening, it's already begun. A deeper part of you is waking up. Not the loud, hyped up achiever. The ancient part, the calm one, the structured one. The one who builds in silence and doesn't flinch at chaos. But before you reclaim him fully, you have to do one more thing. Forgive yourself. Forgive the years you lost. Forgive the seasons wasted on avoidance. Forgive the younger you for not knowing better. This is not about punishment. It's about maturity. The immature man says, I'm broken. I need fixing. The mature man says, I'm whole. I just forgot who I am. So let's remember, every time you choose structure over chaos, presence over distraction, action over hesitation, you are not becoming someone new. You are returning. Returning to the man your younger self cried out for. The man your older self will bow in gratitude to. The man who finally walks in alignment. Because the greatest work of your life isn't achievement. It's integration. It's individuation, as Jung called it. The uniting of every fractured piece of you into one living, breathing truth. And discipline. That's the bridge. That's how you prove to your unconscious that you are no longer a wandering shadow. You're the king. You've returned. So let me leave you with this question. What would your life look like if you stopped living as a reaction and started living as a declaration? Because now we complete the descent. We confront the final resistance. Time. Death. The war that rages when you avoid order, and the quiet strength that begins when you stop waiting to feel ready and start leading. This isn't about becoming productive. It's about becoming sovereign. Because time doesn't just pass. It accumulates. Every moment you delay, it doesn't disappear. It becomes part of the architecture of your life. Not just as a missed opportunity, but as a brick in the cathedral of regret. You don't just lose time. You become shaped by the loss. Carl Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That line should haunt you. Not because it's cruel, but because it's the clearest mirror you'll ever face. You don't need a life coach to tell you who you are. You're already proving it every single day. Most people don't even notice when it happens. The drift, the delay, the slow slide. They just wake up 10 years later and realize the man they've become is not the man they admire. He's a version sculpted by hesitation, by soft betrayals, by lies disguised as self-care, by fears that wore masks labeled balance or humility. You were never born lazy. You were trained to mistrust your own power. You've spent years dulling the blade of your ambition, making yourself smaller, so you wouldn't threaten anyone, not even yourself. Because real discipline, it changes the room. It carries a weight, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. And that weight unsettles people. People still asleep, people still hiding. That's why you started dimming your light. That's why you walked away from your edge. You didn't want to be alone. But what if that loneliness wasn't punishment? What if it was initiation? A test? A passage? Here's what most men never realize until it's too late. Every time you betray your potential to remain comfortable, you're practicing death. Not physical death, but something slower, quieter, more tragic. The erosion of your spirit, the disappearance of hunger, the resignation of a man who once burned, but now only simmers in regret. Jung didn't say meaning comes from chasing happiness. He said it comes from confrontation, from facing the dragon, the chaos, the grief, the failure, and walking straight into it. Eyes open, sword drawn. That sword? That's your discipline. It doesn't remove fear, It gives you something stronger, direction, because every man is disciplined. The only question is, to what? Some are disciplined to their distractions, some to their addictions, others to the doubts they inherited but never questioned. But very few are disciplined to their becoming. And if that's who you want to be, you need to understand something deeper. Discipline is not a grind. It's not a phase. It's a relationship with time. Let me explain. Every time you choose what feels good now instead of what builds you later, you're telling time, I don't respect you. And time? Time listens. Time responds. Time begins to turn against you. You feel late. You feel stuck. You feel like life is slipping because you never honored the gift you were given. But when you realign, when you start living with reverence for time, everything changes. Not externally, not right away, but internally. You begin to feel carried, not by hype, but by rhythm. You stop reacting. You start ritualizing. And at the highest level, discipline becomes ritual, a sacred rhythm between who you are and who you've sworn to become. You wake up not because you have to, but because you get to meet your oath again. You train, not to punish yourself, but to remember who you are. You eat clean, not for vanity, but because your body is the temple of your resolve. Everything echoes, everything aligns, and one day, the man you used to fantasize about, he's no longer a distant dream. He's in your mirror. But let me make this clear. It won't happen in a week. It won't come from one breakthrough or one late night, I got this speech. Discipline isn't built on hype. It's built on grief. Because to become the man you were meant to be, you must let the other one die. The one who broke promises to himself. The one who hid behind someday. The one who laid in bed scrolling through dreams he never dared to live. You don't bury him in guilt. You bury him in honor. Because he did his job. He kept you safe. He got you here. But his time is done. And when you grieve him, when you stop fighting him and thank him, you release the energy you've been using to pretend. And with that energy, you build. You build mornings that begin with clarity, not chaos. You build rituals that root you, even when you don't feel like it. You build a schedule that doesn't trap you, it liberates you. Because order isn't your enemy, it's your armor. And the more chaotic the world becomes, the more valuable a calm, structured man is. Not next Monday. Not after one last failure. Now, because this moment, this breath, this heartbeat pulsing in your chest is your initiation. You don't need another reason. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to find motivation. You are already worthy of being disciplined. You just forgot. So let them be the last reminder. Carl Jung believed that wholeness isn't achieved by stacking more, doing more, chasing more. Wholeness is achieved by embracing all of you, even the parts you avoid, even the parts that feel lazy, chaotic, insecure, small. You're not here to run from them. You're here to lead them, to step into the mess with calm authority, to build order inside the noise. And when you do, when your inner house is finally in order, you won't just feel powerful, you'll feel peaceful. Because real discipline, it doesn't shout, it doesn't flex, it doesn't perform for praise. It walks quietly, daily, like a man who has finally remembered what he came here to do. So return to your vow, not tomorrow, now. Because once you do, you'll never avoid discipline again. Not because you have to, but because you'll finally know what it feels like to be a man who keeps his word to himself.